The Suncatchers, a 20-year race. In a small town under a big bright sun, two best friends named Steve and Chris spent every afternoon in a cluttered garage. While other kids played tag, they huddled over a chalkboard, sketching sleek shapes that looked like spaceships. One day, Steve whispered, pointing to a drawing of a car covered in shiny blue scales. "We will build a car that runs only on sunshine. It will be the most efficient machine the world has ever seen." They didn't just want a fast car, they wanted a smart one. They began building small models out of balsa wood and tiny solar cells. When the wood snapped or the wires crossed, Chris would feel like quitting. But Steve would tap the workbench and say the word they had learned in school: persevere. They broke it down together, chanting persevere like a magic spell to keep their spirits high. 10 years flew by. The boys were now young men, and their garage had turned into a high-tech lab. Their first full-sized prototype, the Sunrunner, was finally ready. It wasn't made of wood anymore, but lightweight carbon fiber. They worked through holidays and birthdays, fueled by cold pizza and the dream of a fuel-free future. They were no longer just playing, they were innovating. Then came the great storm. During a high-speed test on a lonely desert road, a sudden gale flipped the Sunrunner. The sound of crunching metal and shattering solar glass echoed across the sand. Chris sat in the dirt, staring at the wreckage of 3 years of hard work. His hands shook, and hot tears tracked through the dust on his face. The pain of failure felt heavier than the car itself. Steve walked over and sat beside him. He didn't offer excuses or anger. He simply put a hand on Chris's shoulder. "The road to the sun is paved with bumps, Chris," he said softly. "But remember our word, persevere." They sat in the silence of the desert for a long time, until finally Chris looked up and nodded. They wouldn't let one storm stop a 20-year dream. To fund their next build, they visited a giant car factory. They watched as massive machines stamped out thousands of identical heavy engines. "It's like fudge cookies on a conveyor belt," Steve remarked, watching the gray cars roll by. "They are all the same, and they all use so much fuel. We have to be different. We have to be better." They knew their path would be harder, because they weren't making cookies. They were making a miracle. Years 15 through 18 were the hardest. Money was tight, and many experts told them that a 100% solar EV was impossible. Chris spent many nights sleeping on a cot in the lab, his muscles aching from hours of soldering. The PEER and the SE were done, but they were struggling with the VEER. Every obstacle felt like a mountain, but they kept climbing, one wire at a time. While Chris rested, Steve spent his nights staring at the physics of the solar cells. He redesigned the way the panels captured light, making them move like sunflowers following the sun. He didn't mind the solitude. He saw every mistake as a lesson. He knew that self-belief was the most powerful battery they had, and he refused to let his charge run low. 20 years after that first chalkboard sketch, the day finally arrived. The Solara stood in the driveway, a shimmering teal masterpiece that weighed less than a motorcycle and captured more energy than a house. Steve and Chris, now grown men with a few gray hairs, looked at each other. They didn't need to say the word anymore. They had lived it. They took the Solara on a cross-country journey. While other cars stopped at noisy, smelly gas stations, Steve and Chris simply kept driving. The sun was their fuel, silent and free. They drove through forests, over mountains, and across plains. Every mile was a victory over the doubts they had faced for 2 decades. At the end of their journey, a crowd gathered to cheer. They had broken the world record for efficiency. People asked how they did it, expecting a secret formula or a magic engine. Steve and Chris just laughed and told them about the garage, the broken balsa wood, and the desert crash. They told them that the most important part of the car wasn't the panels, but the will to never stop. That evening, they sat on a porch, sharing a jar of fresh honey from a local farm. The fruits of your labor, Chris said, taking a taste, are as sweet as honey. Steve nodded, looking up at the setting sun. They had learned that if you persevere, you don't just build a car, you build a life that shines.